Again, if there is a nation in need for water, with over 80 million in their people, with very limited sources, just one source of water, it's the Nile. I'm talking about Egypt. And there's another nation with, again, nearly 80 million, but many sources of Nile water. How can we deal with this situation? How can Ethiopia has a lot of other sources. I believe that Ethiopia has 12 rivers, plus the rain most of the year. You have something like 2,000 millimeter a year from the rain. Egypt has something like 20 to 100 millimeter. How can you convince Egyptians that the situation, the position of Ethiopia is for their sake, not against them?
Again, Ethiopians have to understand that Egypt is a creation of the Nile. And Ethiopians have to understand that Egypt must benefit from the Nile. Mm-hmm. This is necessary condition. At the same time, Egyptians have to understand that this is a country of 80 million, which has had hunger for almost 40 years now. So yes, there is rain in some parts of the country, but there is no rain in the other parts of the country. And we don't need to give you more proof than the hungry people of Ethiopians you see every year. So for the Egyptians to say, the Ethiopians let them be hungry, it doesn't make sense. The Egyptians will also have to understand that Ethiopians will have to benefit from the Nile. When we recognize that, it means that we will find a technical solution. What is the main content of the technical solution? Egypt does not have the potential to generate much electricity from the Nile. Mm-hmm. It's already generating the electricity in Aswan. It doesn't have additional potential. Ethiopia has huge potential on the Nile to generate electricity. Egypt has big potential for irrigation. Ethiopia has small potential for irrigation. So what do? Ethiopia focuses on generating electricity. Egypt focuses on irrigation. Yet, Egypt also raises some electricity. Mm-hmm. Yet, Ethiopia also does some irrigation. When you add that up, you have an optimal solution for both countries. The same thing with Sudan. The same thing with Uganda, Tanzania, and the others. Mm-hmm. There is an optimal technical solution, so long as we accept that we all have to benefit. Ethiopia is not saying we should divide the Nile water equally. We didn't say that. We said, let us divide it equitably. We know Egypt needs more water.
According to the needs of every nation.
According to the need of every nation. We know, for example, Egypt needs more water for irrigation than Ethiopia.
That's right.
So it doesn't make sense for us to ask the same amount of water as Egypt. And we are not asking for the same amount of water as Egypt. What we are asking is to build all the necessary dams to generate electricity and enough water to irrigate our own land. That's it. And we do not need as much water as Egypt to irrigate our land.
There is an Ethiopian commitment that no projects will make it, Ethiopia will make it, will affect Egyptian share of the Nile, the level of the share now?
The level of the share now is 100% for Egypt and Sudan. So if we are to agree that we will not change it, then it means we will not take a liter of water from the Nile. And that cannot be. This is 19th century attitude. Mm-hmm. What we are saying is, let's find an optimal solution. And there is an optimal solution, which provides for Ethiopia to use water on the Nile without hurting Egypt. You said earlier on that by optimizing the use of the water, 14 billion cubic meters could be found.
Yeah.
So let's optimize, and the 14 billion cubic meters may be more than enough for Ethiopia.
Why don't we connect it together? Why don't we start with optimizing the Nile water, the use of the Nile water, then we can talk about the shares.
The very simple reason is because Sudan and Egypt are saying you have to accept the 1959 agreement before we start discussion on sharing of the Nile. The 1959 agreement says you don't have any share.
Yeah.
Egypt and Sudan have control of 100%, and it says when Egypt and Sudan decide to give you 1 liter, you will get 1 liter. When they decide to give you 2 liters, you get 2 liters. There is no equity in the 1959 agreement. And Egypt and Sudan are insisting that we should accept it. This will not happen. This is not 19th century. This is 21st century.
If you are leading Egypt, what are you going to do in this situation?
If I were the leader of Egypt, I would recognize 2 things. One, the old policy of previous regimes in Egypt, which is based on stopping Ethiopia from utilizing the Nile water by stabilization of Ethiopia and by preventing Ethiopia from accessing loan and grant for Nile projects. That approach is dead. It's finished. It's finished because Ethiopia has reached a stage where it can build its own dams with its own money. So that is finished, that is dead. So the only alternative left for me, if I were an Egyptian leader, is to talk to the Ethiopians and say, look, the Nile is for all of us. Let's share it wisely. Use it without damaging my interest. I'll talk to the Ethiopians like this. And if an Egyptian leader was to talk to us as Ethiopians like this, we would have an agreement the next day.
And how can you address your people that our share of Nile water, we will not be able to keep it anymore? How can you convince your people about this matter?
But you see, Egypt's share of the Nile water includes the water that is wasted on the canals. And if the Egyptian is going to tell me, I have the right to waste the Nile water, but Ethiopians, you have to go hungry because you do not have right to 1 liter of water, that Egyptian is thinking like a 19th century person. He is not thinking like a 21st century person.
Do you think that Egyptians think this way?
There are some Egyptians who think like this way.
But the majority, the decision maker, I don't think they think this way.
Well, my guess is the majority don't think this way, but so far they have not been able to convince the minority and tell them that 19th century thinking is not going to work. Because up to now, the Egyptian government is still insisting that all the other countries accept the 1959 and 1929 agreement, which makes the 7 countries beggars of Nile water, not co-owners of Nile water. They are still insisting on this. And in the 19th century, it was imposed by the British in the colonies.
Yeah.
In the 21st century, it cannot be imposed on anyone.
The borders has been made by colonies.
And Africans accepted those borders, but they did not accept all the colonial treaties. They rejected it. Now this does not affect Ethiopia because Ethiopia has no colonial treaty. It was not colonized by anybody. Ethiopia did not sign 1929 agreement. Ethiopia did not sign 1959 agreement. So both treaties are irrelevant for Ethiopia. But they are relevant for Uganda. Because Uganda was under the British colony, and the 1929 agreement affects Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania. But these countries have said, this is a colonial treaty. We will not accept it. They have rejected it. And it's fair that they reject it.